Good evening. My name is Bruce Templeton, and I welcome you on behalf of the congregation of St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in the historic Ecclesiastical District in downtown St. John's. Our guest speaker, Megan, will be introduced shortly. This building is our third. The first was constructed on this site by the people in 1842. While there are assets of windows and organs, our greatest asset is our congregation. Our congregation is priceless. In a coming service, we will honor the 25 very young men from this congregation who did not return from the First War, and as you came in the door are the names of the 8 who did not return from the Second War. I've conducted sermons in this church from this pulpit, and when I do it, I think about what would happen if we took 25 young people from this congregation today, or any of our churches. So I think about that. In our ecclesiastical district, it was the youth from the Catholic Cadet Corps, the CCC, at the Basilica, the CLB from the Cathedral, the Methodist Guard from Gower, and the Newfoundland Highlanders, who largely formed the Newfoundland Regiment. In all of our congregations, it is the people that have made them what they are today and will prayerfully continue to grow into the future. I am thrilled, and so is Heather, to see so many of you turn out for this event tonight. And please remember, you are always welcome in our churches. A special welcome to those who are joining us online. Heather tells me there are people watching this from all over the world. So I hope you enjoy it. We welcome the Honorable John Abbott, our MHA. Thank you for coming, sir. We are delighted to be hosting this event at the Kirk. The ecclesiastical district goes back to the 1600s, and this year the Anglican congregation is celebrating their 325th anniversary. So everybody come down on June 22nd from noon to 5 and join 1699 on Gower Street. Lots of fun, lots of music. Going to be great events down in the cathedral. Gower Street's planning a busy summer with lots of events. We have just finished 2 wonderful days with the Irish ambassador and his delegation at the Basilica. I have just ordered 1,100 pounds of lobster. And on June the 12th and 13th, we will celebrate our famous lobster dinner here in the Kirk. Yes, we have some reserved for you. Our buildings may be historic properties, but our congregations are not. There's a great deal happening in all of our churches, and you are welcome to come and join us on the journey. I hope you enjoy the evening, and I now turn over the microphone to Heather McClellan from St. Andrews, who's a member of the district's working committee. Please enjoy the presentation, and thank you for coming.
Welcome to a special evening in the district here in St. John's, and to a special presentation of one of Canada's incredible historic treasures. We are delighted that Megan Donoghue-Stanford from York University in Toronto is going to share some new research with us tonight about the artistic and the cultural meaning of the stained glass collections here in the district. Megan is a PhD student in art history and in visual culture, which makes it very interesting for Newfoundland. And her talk tonight will focus on 5 out of at least 10 of the stained glass masters who have collections here in the district. And when Megan is finished, her PhD will be a comprehensive study of all the stained glass in the district. It will also include the historical figures that are associated and memorialized with the windows, and as well the historical importance of the congregations for whom the windows were created. Now, National Historic Sites, such as the Ecclesiastical District, are intended to act as places of learning and provide a visual connection to our historic past. Fortunate for us, Megan is going to help us tonight with some of that understanding. I'm also expecting after tonight, we're going to hear things like, oh, I own a cosh, or have you seen the Kempes at the Anglican Cathedral? Well, I think I'm going to go to the Basilica to see the Warringtons, or maybe to Windsor Castle. And then some people are going to Edinburgh to see more Ballantines. However, before Megan gets underway, I wanted to let you know that a big team planned tonight's event. So thank you for coming out, and members of all the 4 churches. And after Megan has completed her presentation, we're going to take some questions for about 10 minutes. There's going to be tea and coffee served in our hall afterwards. And we're launching our very first pop-up stained glass market. And it's a great chance to do some early Christmas shopping. And we're launching our new War Memorial ornament, as well as a new luxury line of Ballantine wool that's capturing the colors and the stories of our Ballantine window. And the Anglican Cathedral have ornaments that are associated with Kempe, and the Basilica are here with windows associated with Cosh and Warrington. What you really need to know is our washrooms are located right along here through this door. And if you see the choir gowns, you know you're going in the right direction. And it's a good time to turn off your ringers. Now, representing the government of Newfoundland and Labrador tonight is the Honourable John Abbott, who is now going to say a few words. And thank you for coming.
Well, excuse me. Good evening, everyone, and it's certainly a pleasure to be here. And Heather, I can actually claim that I live in a house that has a stained glass window that was installed in 1890, and it came from Europe, and it was by the eminent Koch window architect and designer, and it's absolutely beautiful. So if you're ever in Witless Bay, anyone, you're welcome to come and visit. And it's in a house that my wife, Colleen Hanrahan, sort of has restored, and we're now living there. It was the former presentation comment, so you can appreciate it has lots of rooms and lots of interesting pieces to look at and appreciate. But I'm here really just to thank Megan for taking on this work. Who would ever thought that you can get a PhD in a piece of glass? So there you go. And it's very, very important that we learn about the values of this community, the investment that community has put into our physical and built heritage, such as this facility, this church, but the whole district. And I've been working on the sidelines, more supportive of what the Ecclesiastical District has been trying to promote here, both locally, provincially, and nationally. So we have a great asset, as Bruce said, not only in the physical structures, but in the people who are working very hard, day in, day out, to preserve and protect that which you see. So I'm looking forward to the presentation tonight. I hope everybody will enjoy it, and we'll learn a lot. So thank you, folks.
Thank you, Minister Abbott. When we knew Megan was coming to St. John's in the spring to do more research, Dr. John Fitzgerald boldly said, "Megan, will you do a public talk while you're here?" So thank you, John. And Megan nicely agreed. She has put a lot of work into preparing for tonight. And now I'm going to turn it over to Megan.
Thank you, Heather, and good evening, everyone. My name is Megan Donoghue-Stanford, and it's a pleasure to be here at St. Andrews to discuss the pre-Confederation stained glass windows of the Ecclesiastical District National Historic Site of Canada. Stained glass is an art form that became an integral part of ecclesiastical architecture in the 12th century, when, in his rebuilding of the Abbey of Saint Denis, north of Paris, Abbot Suger used stained glass for its meditative and spiritual qualities. After a decline in use in the 17th and 18th centuries, stained glass once again became closely associated with church architecture and spiritual reflection during the medieval revival of the 19th century. The pre-Confederation windows of the Ecclesiastical District of St. John's were part of this 19th century movement. In this image, from atop Signal Hill, the Ecclesiastical District National Historic Site can be easily seen. The district holds immense cultural value for the city of St. John's. It contains the principal churches of the 4 denominations that influenced the cultural and political climate of the city in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The Roman Catholic, Anglican, Presbyterian, and Methodist now united churches. The 19th century marked the height of rivalry between the various Christian denominations in Newfoundland, resulting in the competitive construction of distinctive houses of worship. The Roman Catholic Basilica Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, the Anglican Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, and Gower Street United Church, formerly Methodist, were all built in specific architectural styles to reflect their denominations. The 4 churches contain both architectural features and stained glass that connect parishioners of these churches to their specific denominational, national, and social identities, reflecting the time in which these churches were built. With the Anglican Church being the established Church of England and its congregation composed of English settlers, the cathedral was built in the favored English Gothic style, using sandstone imported from Scotland and local bluestone. Celebrated revival architect Sir George Gilbert Scott referred to prominent medieval churches in England for his design. Construction began in 1847, with the nave being consecrated in 1850, and by 1885, with the exception of the tower and spire, the cathedral was largely finished. However, the Great Fire of 1892 in St. John's caused significant damage to the building. Reconstruction was completed in 1905. The fire resulted in the tower from Scott's original design remaining incomplete. With much of the original glass lost in the fire, new stained glass windows were installed in the cathedral during and after this reconstruction, with the windows featuring English martyrs and saints. Gower Street United, originally Gower Street Methodist Church, was completed in 1896 following the loss of the previous building in the Great Fire. The Methodist Church also has ties to England, but Gower was built in the Romanesque revival style out of Accrington brick to distinguish itself from the Anglican Church. Gower's hammer beam roof takes authority from late medieval models, visually maintaining the church's ties to England. Gower was designed by Elijah Hoole, a well-established architect of Methodist chapels in England, who conducted the restoration of Wesley's Chapel in London. Selecting Hoole as an architect directly connected Gower Street Methodist Church to the Methodist Church in England. The Roman Catholic Basilica Cathedral's construction was managed by Bishop Michael Anthony Fleming, following the plans of architect Ole Jorgen Schmidt, and was completed in 1855. The cathedral's architecture was modeled after churches in Rome to represent its Catholic faith. It was built using a combination of granite and limestone imported from Ireland, as well as stone from quarries near St. John's. The use of Irish stone ties the basilica back to Ireland, particularly to Dublin and Galway, where the granite and limestone came from. This connection to Ireland is further cemented by the interior decoration of the basilica, which features artworks by famous Irish sculptors, and even its earliest stained glass features Irish saints. The architectural firm of Wills, Pearson, and Green were commissioned to build St. Andrew's to serve the Presbyterian Scottish community of St. John's. The new church, being rebuilt after the Great Fire and completed in 1896, was furnished in the Gothic Revival style. Like Gower, it was Accrington brick that was used for the building materials in its construction, but the kirk also imported Giffnock stone from Scotland, creating a direct link between St. Andrew's and Scotland. Reference to the congregation's denomination is found in the burning bush medallion, a symbol of the Presbyterian Church, the national church of Scotland, which is incorporated into the tower of the kirk. Not only is this medallion symbolic of the faith of the congregation, but also of their history, for it was what remained of the church that was destroyed in the Great Fire of 1892. The four principal churches in the ecclesiastical district carefully selected architectural styles and building materials that established physical ties to England, Ireland, and Scotland, serving as a visible representation of their congregation's denominational and cultural identities. The proximity of the churches within the ecclesiastical district stiffened the competition between the denominations, amplifying the physical representations of identity within the interiors of the churches as well, as reflected in their stained glass. Though there are many themes and subjects among the district's pre-Confederation windows, this talk specifically focuses on windows installed before Confederation in 1949, which reflect both the unique and common beliefs of the churches in the district. For example, Gower Street United's Methodist history is reflected in the pattern windows of its pre-Confederation stained glass. It was the singular church in the district that installed decorative glass only. The other churches in the district contain figurative and pictorial windows. The Anglican Cathedral and Basilica Cathedral have pre-Confederation windows featuring the Virgin and Child. The Kirk, Basilica Cathedral, and Anglican Cathedral all have stained glass windows which focus on the life of Christ. Despite the presence of similar themes and programs, there are several important differences. These windows are stylistically different and designed by a variety of studios, with some being installed as early as 1857, in the height of the medieval revival, and others as late as 1933, long after the Gothic revival had passed. This resulted in these similar themes being presented in the stained glass of these three buildings in very different ways, including differences in design, location, programming, and method of display. This talk will explore how the denominational and cultural identity of each of the churches in the ecclesiastical district is exhibited in its choice of subject matter, how it is presented, and the studios that were chosen. We will begin our examination of the district with the pattern windows of Gower Street United. Gower's oldest stained glass windows were installed following the construction of the current church after the Great Fire of 1892. Until 1925, when several Protestant denominations, including the Methodist Churches of St. John's, unified to become the United Church of Canada, Gower Street Methodist Church was one of the oldest Methodist congregations in the city and had a church serving the community since 1815. These early pattern windows reflect this part of the building's history. Only a few examples of these windows remain and are marked on the map. Many were replaced by the pictorial windows designed by the Luxfer firm that were installed in the 1960s. In the remaining examples, such as the full window found in Gower's staircase, the geometric designs can be easily seen. Both the Anglican Cathedral and the Kirk use patterned glass in their high clerestory windows, where it would be difficult for parishioners to see full pictorial scenes. However, at Gower, patterned glass was originally used exclusively throughout the church. This was due to the reluctance among Methodist churches to accept stained glass during the Gothic revival, as stained glass and other decor was believed to distract from Scripture. Stained glass only gained traction in England's Methodist churches in the late 19th century. Even following this acceptance, windows of Methodist churches in England reflected the austerity promoted by the founder of Methodism, John Wesley, and geometric windows were most often adopted. If pictorial windows were featured at all, they focused on the gospel. Though now nestled among modern pictorial windows made by the Luxford firm, each of the remaining pattern windows at Gower has its own geometric design and employs the use of multiple colors. The remaining full windows, found in Gower's staircase and inquiry room, alternate between a yellow and purple diamond pattern and a red and blue checkered pattern, with detailed outlining completed in dark red. The other windows, found above Gower's doors, also make use of this dark red, which forms circular medallions encasing the geometric designs of the windows. With these examples, it's easy to envision the interior of Gower before Confederation. Gower's pattern windows draw on the tradition in Methodist churches of bringing in the colorful nature of decorative stained glass without making it a focal point. Having looked at the pattern windows of Gower Street United, we will turn our attention to the figural and pictorial windows of the other churches in the district and compare their shared themes and subject matter. We will begin with one of the oldest subjects in Christian art, the Virgin and Child. These windows focus on the relationship between Mary and Christ. The Roman Catholic Basilica Cathedral and Anglican Cathedral both have windows portraying the Virgin and Child. The dates of the windows and the manner of their depiction vary. The earliest windows of the Virgin and Child in the district date to the 1850s and are found in the Catholic Basilica. Looking at the floor plan of the Basilica, we will be examining window 16, the St. Jude, the Virgin Mary, and the St. John the Baptist window, located in the apse, and window 21, the Queen of the Holy Rosary, found in the east transept. The earliest depiction of the Virgin and Child within the churches of the Ecclesiastical district is found in the windows of the apse of the Basilica, which features the Apostles of Christ. The window representing St. Jude, the Virgin Mary, and St. John the Baptist dates to 1857 and was designed by the William Warrington firm of London, active between 1832 and 1875. It was completed in the early medieval revival style. Warrington was one of the earliest members of the English Gothic revival, explaining the fully medievalist design of this window. Medieval aspects include the strict two-dimensionality of the design, the use of densely patterned borders and backgrounds divided into interlocking medallions and geometric shapes, foliage designs, and the use of bright, colorful glass contrasted with white glass. As in much medieval glass, the figures are arranged in a tier at the center of the window, with the Virgin and Child in the middle, St. Jude above, and St. John the Baptist below. The figures are separated by a foliage motif, which encases each in its own medallion. The Queen of the Holy Rosary, from 1859, was also the work of Warrington. The Virgin and Child are featured in rich primary colors in the center of the window, surrounded by ornate patterns. Mary stands closely surrounded by a flat, ornate Gothic architectural structure known as a canopy, another motif inherited from medieval prototypes, and one which will be widely adopted. In both windows, the Virgin and Child share a similar pose, as Mary is shown holding the infant Christ. The relationship between Mary and Christ has a significant amount of historical precedence as a subject in Christian art, especially Roman Catholic art, with the Virgin and Christ often posed in a comparable manner to what is found in these two windows at the Basilica. It is unsurprising that such a venerated subject is depicted in two of the earliest windows here, as it reflects the historical and continued veneration of Mary in the Roman Catholic faith. But specific to this window, and to the Basilica, is another aspect of iconography. Two Irish saints, Munchin and Aidan, are featured in the medallion above the Virgin and Child. These saints represent the areas in Ireland from which many of the early immigrants of the cathedral came, Limerick and Wexford. Thus, while the Virgin and Child is a visual representation of the congregation's Roman Catholic identity, these two saints reflect the specifically Irish Catholic identity of the Basilica's congregation. At the Anglican Cathedral, there is only one window dedicated to the Virgin and Child that is not part of the cathedral's Life of Christ program. Looking to the floor plan of the cathedral, St. Michael and the Archangel and the Virgin and Child window from 1909 by C.E. Kempe is located next to the western entrance of the cathedral. The window features a Gothic canopy and the use of dark colors. Similar to other windows in the nave, the window adopts a medieval hierarchical depiction of the figures in the upper half. The upper half features St. Michael the Archangel, and the lower half contains Mary and the infant Christ. Mary is seen embracing the Christ child, highlighting her love for Christ and her role as his mother. Representations of the Virgin and Child are similar between the Catholic and Anglican cathedrals, as both highlight the role of Mary as mother. The differences in style between Kempe's window in the Anglican cathedral and Warrington's windows in the basilica, however, are obvious. Warrington's work, in the early revival style, lacks the realistic painting of the Kempe window installed half a century later. Warrington, as an early member of the revival, was dedicated to medieval sources as his sole inspiration, sometimes even to his detriment, as revealed in the scathing reviews of his work from the Ecclesiastical Society. Kempe himself, and his firm after his passing in 1907, were not as limited by the expectations of the ecclesiologists and the early revivalists. His more medieval designs have a painting style influenced by the late 15th century Northern Renaissance. In England, Kempe and other firms likely looked to St. Mary's Church in Fairford, Gloucestershire, where the early 16th century work of Flemish glazier Bernard Flower survived the destruction of the stained glass that occurred in England during the Reformation. The Basilica Cathedral and Anglican Cathedral's Virgin and Child windows are representative of the Anglican and Roman Catholic faiths and their continued veneration of Mary. No images of Mary or the Virgin and Child are found at the kirk outside of their Life of Christ windows, or in the pre-Confederation windows of Gower Street United. This is due to the emphasis placed on the gospel in many Protestant faiths. Another common subject of stained glass of the Ecclesiastical District is the life of Christ. Historically, these windows educated parishioners on the events of the Gospels, with the stained glass allowing worshippers to reflect on the Christ-like behavior as light shone through the colorful glass. During the Gothic Revival, this function of stained glass remained the same, a way to quell parishioners' curiosities about Christ and the Gospels. St. Andrew's, the Basilica Cathedral, and the Anglican Cathedral have programs or series of windows that present a narrative of Christ's life. Though the programs share a similar theme, each church has windows depicting particular events in the Gospels that the other two churches do not include. The sequence and location of the Life of Christ programs also differ greatly among the churches. The Life of Christ windows of St. Andrew's are the main program of the church's stained glass and represent gospel events from the Nativity to the Resurrection. The windows were all created by A. Ballantine and Sons, a Scottish firm located in Edinburgh and credited with igniting the stained glass revival in Scotland. Open from 1828 into the 20th century, the firm went through several name changes, including Ballantine and Allen, Ballantine and Gardner, and A. Ballantine and Sons. For the sake of clarity, we will simply refer to the firm as Ballantine. Their windows are found in both Greyfriars Kirk and St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, among many other places. The Ballantine windows at St. Andrew's were installed between 1902 and 1926, following this resurgence of stained glass in Presbyterian churches. The placement of the windows in St. Andrew's does not follow the narrative order of the Gospels. Instead, windows are grouped thematically in different locations throughout the church. On the floor plan, these locations include windows behind the communion table, highlighted in red, the windows of the east side of the nave, circled in green, and the windows of the transepts, highlighted in yellow. I will discuss the windows according to their locations to better demonstrate these groupings. The Life of Christ series begins with the Visit of the Wise Men window, located in the chancel to the left of the communion table, a placement that denotes the significance of the Nativity within the narrative. The window has two lights, or openings, which when combined form a full scene. Ballantine incorporates Gothic canopies in the design of the window, which frame the subjects and match the Gothic revival architecture of the building. The members of the Holy Family are identified by white halos with a golden pattern within them. The Christ Child's halo contains a subtle shape of the cross, as seen in the image above the title, alluding to his crucifixion. This symbol is repeated in Christ's halo throughout the series, though the design varies. Incorporating symbols of the crucifixion in depictions of the Christ Child is a common practice in Christian art and is meant to serve as a reminder of Christ's eventual sacrifice and resurrection. While the symbol of the cross reminds parishioners of the crucifixion, the window focuses on the joy of Christ's birth. Next to the visit of the wise men is the entry into Jerusalem window. In the left light, Jesus rides into Jerusalem on a donkey on Palm Sunday, and in the right light, the apostles accompany him and distribute items to the crowd. Christ and his disciples are emphasized, as they are the only figures depicted in full color, as silver stain and matte on white glass are used to create the distant crowd. This window, significantly located behind the communion table and the organ, portrays the start of Holy Week, which leads to Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. The next window of the series is the Jesus the Scholar window, located on the east wall of the nave. The window depicts the young Jesus and his family before the teachers in the temple in Jerusalem. Depictions of the young Jesus are often used to satisfy parishioners' curiosities about Christ's early life, but they do not appear as regularly as images of the Nativity. The Jesus the Scholar window has a less ornate Gothic canopy and makes use of brighter colors than the windows behind the communion table. The less fussy figure style and less emphatic lighting would indicate a different artist in the Ballantine studio worked on this window. Next to the Jesus the Scholar window is the Jesus the Teacher window, which shows Jesus in his ministry. The left light contains a crowd of Christ followers, and the right light depicts Christ. The gold patterns depicted in the clothing of both Jesus and the crowd capture the eye of the viewer. Christ himself is emphasized by bright red, black, and gold clothing. The black, white, and gold pattern is repeated in Christ's halo, and the gold of the clothing is complemented by the gold detailing of the canopy. This method is used to emphasize the adult Christ through the rest of the life of Christ cycle. Beside the Jesus the Teacher window, one will find a design that differs from the other windows in the program, as it depicts two separate scenes rather than one scene split across the double lights. The left light depicts the agony in the garden, and the right light depicts Christ's crown of thorns carrying the cross. The two canopies are similar in design to those found in the adjacent Jesus the Teacher window, but contain none of the gold detailing, as they are depicted in black and white. Written across the bottom of the two lights is, "Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God," from Revelations chapter 3, verse 12. The quote is well matched with Christ's agony in these two scenes, and the window reminds parishioners of Christ's suffering. The windows of the transepts are the largest windows in the kirk, which emphasize their importance. In the east transept, the crucifixion is a three-light window with trefoils featuring a grapevine motif. It shares the rose window with the war memorial window beside it. Like all transept windows, this window omits the canopy. The window depicts the crucified Christ in the center light, and below him, spread across the three lights, holy women and the disciples mourn, including St. John comforting the Virgin Mary, a popular subject often placed in crucifixion windows. The side openings each include a Roman soldier, one holding a Roman standard and the other on horseback. The crucifixion is Christ's sacrifice for humanity's sins and a key moment in the Christian faith. Featuring it in one of the largest windows in the kirk reminds parishioners of Christ's sacrifice and promise of salvation. Directly across from the crucifixion window, in the west transept, is the resurrection window. Differing in composition from the crucifixion window, but similar in structural layout, the window shares a rose window with the Christ in glory next to it. The resurrected Christ, clad in gold and white, and adored by two angels, is depicted across the upper half of the three lights. Below, holy women, and 2 disciples receive the news of the resurrection from the angel at the tomb. Merging these 2 scenes into a single event is a popular way of portraying Christ's resurrection. Locating this window across from the crucifixion window emphasizes the mystery of Christ's sacrifice, death, and resurrection. The final of our 4 large transept windows in the kirk is the Christ in Glory window. The figures are depicted in a tiered fashion, as seen in the resurrection window, with Jesus at the top and the center light, crowned King of the world, wearing ornately patterned red, white, and gold clothing. In the lower half of the left light, a man sows seed into the earth. In the second light, directly below Christ, angels reap the field. And the third shows a man with the bounty of crops which he has harvested. The window's position next to the resurrection window and across from the crucifixion marks the end of the narrative. Christ now sits on the throne of heaven, promising the faithful a place alongside him. Upon reviewing the windows, it becomes obvious that the ordering of the program was a conscious decision, with the most important events of the life of Christ being placed in areas of significance within the kirk, emphasizing them for particular reflection among the congregation. The windows are paired thematically. Behind the communion table, the windows place emphasis on holy times in the Christian year, and the large windows of the transept connect the death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. Though not highlighted in a similar manner, the Life of Christ windows of the nave work alongside the windows of the communion table and transepts to ensure the congregation's focus remains on the Gospels as they look throughout the church, reflecting the Presbyterian emphasis on Scripture and the life lessons to be learned from it. The Basilica Cathedral also has windows that display scenes from the life of Christ. These windows were installed between 1888 and 1891. They were all created at Charles Lévêque's firm of Beauvais, France, but were designed after his death by his successor, Louis Leichenheld-Koch. While Warrington's windows in the church reflect the taste of the early Gothic revival, Lévêque's windows reflect the growing popularity of German stained glass firms and designs in both Europe and Canada. German stained glass in the 19th century sought inspiration from the Renaissance, resulting in a more pictorial style. Eventually, glaziers outside of Germany adopted this style to compete with these German firms. Koch's images are all in a full pictorial style and are framed by ubiquitous Gothic canopies. They are colorful, with extensive gold detailing, and are 3-dimensional, with detailed Gothic architectural features that vary between windows and even incorporate statue-like figures as seen in the Nativities canopy. The canopies are surrounded by decorative borders, which connect Koch's windows to the Gothic Revival windows made by William Warrington almost 30 years earlier. Koch uses these canopies and decorative borders throughout the basilica to frame his subjects. The Life of Christ windows are in the clerestory on both sides of the nave and in the transept galleries. Their large size ensures the scenes are visible to parishioners attending Mass. The pairings of the windows are marked on the floor plan. We will begin with window 27, the Annunciation from 1891, and window 5, the Resurrection, which are located in the nave across from each other and highlighted in blue. The Annunciation window depicts Mary being visited by the angel Gabriel and told she will bear the Son of God, Jesus. Gabriel approaches Mary within her home with classical columns, furniture, and a serene view of nature outside her window. Though both the Annunciation and Resurrection share a similar compositional structure, the Annunciation greatly contrasts with the dramatic window it is paired with. The Resurrection window combines many different scenes related to the resurrection of Christ, creating an extremely detailed window. Beginning in the background, on the left, small figures of the holy women, clad in gray, are shown discovering the empty tomb. The hill on which Christ was crucified is seen behind them. In the foreground, shocked Roman centurions cower as above them, the risen Jesus, in a golden light with the cross behind him, bursts forth from gray clouds. The pairing of the Annunciation and Resurrection invokes a theme of birth and rebirth. This depiction of the resurrection could not be any more different from Ballantine's resurrection window at the kirk. Cautious dramatic gestures and lighting create a theatrical scene. Christ appears active in the window as if charging forth from the tomb. In comparison, Ballantine's work shows a serene Christ among the clouds as an angel peacefully delivers the news of the resurrection. Cautious dynamic window is further enhanced by the use of vitreous enamels, opaque paints made from crushed glass and metal oxides, which allow for brighter colors and a more painterly style to the window. The color found in the windows of Ballantine and Kempe, and most stained glass of this period, come from the glass itself, with only brown-black matte paint used for the details of the figures, such as their faces. Cautious windows reflect a very continental style when compared to Ballantine and Kempe's more British windows, which do not make use of vitreous paint, leading to the still colorful but more subdued palette of St. Andrew's Resurrection window. The Nativity from 1888 and the Ascension from 1892 windows are located directly across from each other on the east walls of the transept gallery. The Nativity window is actually an adoration of the Christ child, depicting a sleeping infant Jesus, who is settled in hay within the manger. A halo glows atop his head, and he cuddles a cross, symbolizing his future sacrifice for humanity. Above the manger, several angels gather, celebrating and announcing his birth, and at the very top, the star that guided both the wise men and shepherds to the manger can be seen shining brightly. The Ascension was installed 4 years after the Nativity window and makes use of the stacking figures seen in both the Nativity and Resurrection windows. The disciples are gathered on the ground in wonder, as above Jesus ascends to heaven, surrounded by clouds and golden light. The pairing of the Nativity and Ascension invokes the same idea of birth and rebirth as the Annunciation and Resurrection windows. As the Nativity signals the beginning of Christ's life as God's human Son, and then following his resurrection, he ascends into heaven, fully divine. Melchizedek and the Last Supper from 1888 and the Crucifixion from 1891 are found across from each other in the West Transept Gallery. The main figure of the window is the Old Testament figure Melchizedek. A tiny image of the Last Supper, incidentally not based on Da Vinci's famous painting, is inserted in the predella directly below the main subject's feet. Thematically, the window is a reference to Mass and the Eucharist, as Melchizedek is depicted making an offering of bread and wine above the depiction of the Last Supper, where Christ offers bread and wine, his body and blood, the Holy Eucharist. It is also a reference to transubstantiation, an essential Catholic doctrine. Directly across from the window is the Crucifixion window from 1891. Christ is depicted upon the cross, being worn by Mary Magdalene, St. John, and the Virgin Mary. The city of Jerusalem and its hills are seen in the distance. The sky is darkening dramatically at the moment of Christ's death. Positioning the Crucifixion window across from Melchizedek and the Last Supper further emphasizes the sacrifice of Christ's body and the sacrament of communion. The final window that follows the Life of Christ program at the Basilica is the Transfiguration window from 1891. It has no pairing from the series located across from its position in the east nave clerestory. Framed by an elaborate canopy, the window depicts Jesus being declared the Son of God before 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John. He stands on a cloud with Moses and Elijah, Old Testament figures representing the prophets and the law, alongside him, emphasizing Jesus' fulfillment of the messianic prophecy, and as the Son of God. Christ is now confirmed to be fully human and fully divine. The isolation of this window is fitting, as the Transfiguration depicts an important revelation in the life of Christ, Christ's true double nature. The Life of Christ windows in the Roman Catholic Basilica Cathedral are located among windows depicting various themes, from apostles to patron saints, to windows depicting the Holy Family. With this layout of windows, the parishioner must explore the entire cathedral to complete the narrative of Christ's life. This does not suggest that these windows were placed without careful consideration. The placement of the windows creates thematic pairings that connect different parts of the narrative to one another and to the celebration of Mass itself. The organization of the life of Christ windows at the Basilica offers a unique, very Catholic experience for the viewer when compared to the other windows of the ecclesiastical district. The Life of Christ windows at the Anglican Cathedral are part of a program that extends from the library through the Lady Chapel into the sacristy. The windows were made by several firms and installed over several decades, but in this talk we will only be examining the pre-Confederation windows by Lavers Barraud and Westlake and the firm of C.E. Kempe. The C.E. Kempe firm was active in London between 1866 to 1934, and its windows were popular in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They are pictorial, with figures heavily influenced by the 16th century Netherlandish windows in St. Mary's Church in Fairford, Gloucestershire. The majority of Kempe's windows in the series include a Gothic canopy, a motif Kempe's firm continued to employ in their designs even as their style evolved. The canopies make Kempe's windows well suited for the neo-Gothic architecture of the Anglican Cathedral. The Anglican Cathedral's Life of Christ program, unlike the windows at the Catholic Basilica and Presbyterian Kirk, are arranged in chronological order. In terms of the order of the windows, the program is only interrupted by the Great East Window, and the Life of Christ program begins in the cathedral's library. The Annunciation of the Blessed Virgin Mary from 1898 by Kempe is spread across two lights. It is one of the few windows by Kempe that does not feature a canopy, but it does include a highly decorative Gothic arcade across the bottom, which houses the dedication scroll. The palatial setting for the interchange between Mary and Gabriel adapts classic architectural features, while the mountain setting is seen beyond the loggia. The elaborate detailing of the angel's robe and wings is a hallmark of the Kempe style. The faces are precisely painted with matte on white glass, similar to the method Ballantine used in the windows behind the communion table at the Kirk, though the unique styles of each firm make the windows easily identifiable from one another. Beside the Annunciation window in the library is the Worship of Kings from 1898, also by Kempe. The subject is the three kings visiting the Holy Family and presenting gifts. Jesus and Mary are featured in the center light and are framed by a Gothic canopy, with the three kings and Joseph in the left and right lights. The kings repeat the tradition of representing the different ages of adulthood, a common practice in windows depicting the wise men. The inscription, pictured here, is an expression of thankfulness for Queen Victoria's long reign and asks Christ to bless both Queen and country. The window follows the Life of Christ program, while establishing the early Anglican congregation's cultural ties to the English crown and England itself. On the north side of the Lady Chapel features Behold the Man from 1907 by Kempe. The detail is incredible, considering the number of people of all ages, including children, depicted in this window. It shows Jesus being presented to the crowd and sentenced to death. Christ and the Roman governor Pilate are featured in the center light, surrounded by the crowd, highlighting the two main figures and emphasizing Christ's suffering. Below the loggia on which Christ and Pilate stand, Barabbas, who will be released in Christ's place, is shown in his cell. In the Lady Chapel, adjacent to the Great East Window, is the Crucifixion from 1904 by Kempe. It is stylistically different from the other windows in the series, much more restrained in character, and strongly reminiscent of the late Gothic English stained glass, with dominant white canopies and patterned glass infill behind the figures. This three-light window features the Virgin Mary and St. John in the other two lights. The crucified Christ is emphasized in the center light. The design of the window greatly contrasts with the other crucifixion windows by Ballantine and Koch, which are fully pictorial. The design shows Kempe's return to the medieval iconic style of windows design compared to the other windows of the Life of Christ program. This differentiates the crucifixion from the other windows in the series. On the other side of the Great East Window, in the sacristy, is the Resurrection Window, installed at some point between 1889 and 1892 by Lavers, Barraud and Westlake of London, active between 1855 and 1921. This is the only stained glass window to survive the Great Fire of 1892 that destroyed much of St. John's. It provides an idea of what stained glass in the Anglican cathedral might have looked like before the fire. The window has a narrative style, but is far less pictorial than Kempe windows, and reflects the taste of the early revival, being generically similar to Warrington's windows found at the Basilica. It's ornate in its decoration and includes a Gothic canopy and a border of red and gold with a foliage motif. Located on opposite sides of the Great East Window, the Crucifixion is in the Lady Chapel, a space in the cathedral dedicated to Mary, and the Resurrection is in the sacristy, where priests prepare for service. It only makes sense that windows depicting Christ's sacrifice and resurrection, the most crucial parts of the life of Christ, are located in places highlighting their importance. Having examined the windows, let's see what we can make of all of this. The Kirk, Basilica Cathedral, and Anglican Cathedral windows all include aspects of the life of Christ unique to each building. St. Andrew's is the only one of the three to contain windows from this period depicting Christ's childhood, teaching, and a window portraying Christ in glory as seen in the book of Revelations. A window of Pilate's presentation of Christ to the crowd is unique to the Anglican Cathedral. Lastly, a transfiguration window is unique to the Basilica. The differences in chosen subject matter for each church reveals which religious subjects were particularly valued among these three denominational churches. The painting styles of Ballantine, Lévêque, and Kempe's studios allow the Kirk, the Basilica Cathedral, and the Anglican Cathedral to have stained glass that is visually identifiable with each of them. Although the windows reflect the popularity of the pictorial style and make use of Gothic canopies, it would be impossible to confuse one firm's work with another, and thus the windows of one church with another. Even when examining a common design component, the canopy, the difference among the three firms is obvious. Kempe's fussy canopies set his window apart from Ballantine's work. Kempe's ornamental and detailed canopies were often a signature of his windows, particularly in neo-Gothic buildings. Ballantine's canopies display variety in their color scheme, where some are white, and some are white with gold detailing. The stained glass made by Koch for the Lévêque firm features multicolor canopies, with a selection of colors that varies based on the colors selected for the window. And like Ballantine's canopies, they are gilded. Lévêque's windows also have the largest decorative borders and canopies that consistently contain miniature sculptures. These are also the only fully colorful canopies among the three churches. While the different construction dates can be listed as a reason for the different styles and artists selected for each church in the ecclesiastical district, the studios were specifically selected by these churches. These churches chose to import stained glass to St. John's when Canadian studios such as NT Lion and even cheaper firms in Europe were capable of producing the popular pictorial styles. This importation of stained glass from Europe is often directly connected to the national and denominational ties of each congregation. An exception to this is the Basilica Cathedral's choice of William Warrington, which was largely linked to his popularity during the medieval revival movement. Warrington's stained glass windows can be found in English medieval cathedrals and churches, including Ely Cathedral, as well as in revival church buildings. He took commissions from both Anglican and Catholic clients alike. However, the Basilica's choice of the Lévêque firm was a significantly Catholic decision. Located in Beauvais, France, the studio was one of the most popular firms in the French Gothic revival, designing windows for churches in Paris, including Chapelle Saint-Joseph de Cluny. By selecting a studio from the predominantly Catholic France rather than one from England or Scotland, the Basilica Cathedral strengthened its Roman Catholic connections. The dramatic, often theatrical narrative and figural style, with emphatic chiaroscuro and painterly use of enamel, employed by the French studio artist, is a distinctly Catholic European trend adapted from Italian Baroque painting. The Anglican Cathedral's selection of the Kempe studio is directly connected to their Anglican faith. Kempe's firm almost exclusively took on Anglican commissions, and their windows were popular among Anglican churches in England, with his windows found in several churches and cathedrals, including Lichfield Cathedral and Chester Cathedral. He was also popular with Anglican churches abroad, with his firm's windows being imported to Canada, the United States, New Zealand, and Australia. The selection of Ballantine and Sons for the Kirk creates a direct tie to St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, a historically important church in the Presbyterian faith. Moreover, through the selection of Ballantine, the Kirk directly connected itself with a prestigious firm that helped to restore the tradition of stained glass within the Church of Scotland. The less dramatic, more reserved narrative style of the British studio artists, which eschewed the use of enamels, resulting in a more even color tone, visually sets the Anglican and Presbyterian churches apart from their Catholic neighbor. By choosing particular stained glass firms and carefully determining which particular subjects were to be visualized, the Catholic, Anglican, and Presbyterian churches of the Ecclesiastical District were able to have windows that reflected both their unique and common beliefs. Gower Street United's pre-Confederation stained glass windows are a reminder of the church's historical connection to the Methodist Church. Gower's installation of patterned windows instead of the pictorial windows seen in the rest of the district is a distinctly Methodist choice and reflects the religious ideals of Gower's early Methodist congregation. In conclusion, we can say that the four churches in the Ecclesiastical District served as identity-forging tools for their different congregations. Their chosen architectural styles and building materials established physical connections to the Irish, English, and Scottish heritages of the Dominion's early immigrant population. The architectural features project each church's denominational and cultural identity externally, signaling their identities to one another. The windows of the church operate internally and fulfill the historical purpose of stained glass, which was to use visual language to instill values, teachings, and identities within a congregation. Together, the architecture and pre-Confederation windows of the Ecclesiastical District visually represent each church's religious and cultural affiliations in a way that not only served to project these identities to the congregation, but used powerful imagery to mark each denomination's place within the city of St. John's and in Newfoundland. This talk has discussed the pre-Confederation windows of the Ecclesiastical District, which reflect both the unique and common beliefs of its four denominations. With windows installed over a period of 150 years, both before and after Newfoundland's Confederation, there is much more stained glass to explore, and this stained glass acts as a time capsule, preserving the histories and identities of each denomination as both St. John's and Newfoundland changed around them. Stained glass is an aspect of Canadian heritage that is often overlooked and at risk of being lost. Using stained glass as a lens through which we examine the cultural heritage of communities, as seen in our examination of the stained glass of the Ecclesiastical District, would add a new dimension to how we, as Canadians, understand our cultural past. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Don't be shy. Mike?
Okay. So they would. They would be sent in pieces and assembled here, but the measurements would be sent to the studios abroad to make sure that they're pretty much an exact fit. Though sometimes there are errors, especially in installation. You might see wrong panels inserted into windows, so certain windows might have swapped panels. I think that happened at the Basilica, from what I remember. You telling me, John. So that's a possibility. But yeah, they would be assembled here and shipped in sections. No problem.
What are the risks now?
What do you mean by risks? Weather is a big factor, especially here. I know a lot of the churches here do have protective sort of paneling behind the windows, but moisture, damage, just general wear and tear, dust, all of that puts the window's integrity at risk.
The risk is that the community has to decide that these have to stay here. Probably the biggest challenge we have as a church is to try and figure out how to stay open. So the community, the province, the federal government all have to decide how we're going to maintain these structures. And that's probably the biggest risk we face.
I agree with Bruce here. There is a huge risk of these windows being lost. And for me, these windows are an irreplaceable collection. They're imported from Europe and are made by firms that were culturally significant in the Gothic revival and beyond. And they are irreplaceable in terms of their cultural value. I am not an expertise in that, but I would consider, just as the building is part of a National Historic Site, the windows are a feature of the architecture. Stained glass is considered architectural glass, and if the architecture and cultural value of the whole district is important, the stained glass would also be of national cultural value.
Character defining features? Yes. I have a question, Megan. What do you see happening in Europe for the preservation of the stained glass windows that were made by the same houses that we have here?
So not just for windows made by the same houses, but overall in Europe, a lot of the churches are cataloging their stained glass at a national level, which I think is very important. And we also see museums dedicated to stained glass, such as the Stained Glass Museum at Ely Cathedral, collecting stained glass from decommissioned churches in order to preserve it.
Hi, thanks very much for your talk, very helpful to me. I own a window of Kosh. It was in the Witless Bay Convent, which I purchased with my husband. And when I bought the convent, I happened to go in continuously just to check in the window because it's so beautiful. And I was noticing that there were pieces of it. So all of a sudden I could see light. And I knew that meant that there was something not right. So I had someone, Sunhouse Studio, come in and replace the lead. But then about 10 years later, I noticed it was starting to buckle. So by that time, the Basilica had been restored. There had been a big restoration there. And apparently there was a PhD, a woman who came from London, and she introduced Brendan to reinforcing it with steel. So now my window is now reinforced with steel. One of the things that I find, because I had some vandalism in the building. Ours was vacant for a while, and some young people on a Friday night sort of went on a bit of a toot and decided to hurl rocks through my windows. Fortunately, none of the windows, the stained glass window wasn't harmed, and there were other windows that weren't harmed. But now anything that is of value, I put plexiglass covering those windows. So hopefully that'll be protecting them for a while. So it is a beautiful thing to have, to behold. My window is about 5 feet wide and 9 feet tall, and it's in a Gothic style, and it is just beautiful. So, and you're welcome to come look at it whenever you'd like. Thank you.
We're all coming for afternoon tea on Sunday. Okay. There are some methods to help conserve with plexiglass or Lexan, and one is to have an air plug put in it so that they can breathe, on a very, low cost. When I look at England and Scotland, they benefit from what's called a heritage lottery and program, and they get a lot of their funding for the preservation of their windows and their historically important churches from that. And Saskatchewan has just started a heritage lottery, and that might be something that we might all want to think about and make representation on, because it could be a good way to raise some additional money for these masterpieces. And they truly are masterpieces. These buildings, these windows will never be created again. Our ancestors wanted us to have the best that there was in the world at that time. And for instance, our stained glass collection here is insured for $1 million. And, Megan helps us appreciate the art form that's in them, the differences in the art forms. And, you growing up, going to churches, you often took these beautiful windows for granted, but they are masterpieces of art. So, are there any other observations you'd like to make, Megan, or is there anybody else? So, there's a lady over here, yes? Yes. Yes, Sunhound has done amazing restoration work for us when we have had vandalism done. And really like to recognize that talent in that company. So keeping that company and that capability in Newfoundland is important, as well as us having an inventory so we know what we have. I've visited a beautiful church in Burnside that the Barring family donated a beautiful collection of stained glass. And, I don't know if we even really, at this point, really know what we have in Newfoundland. So that can be a big step. As part of getting ready, we reached out to Scotland and England, and Scotland has an inventory, a worldwide inventory for Ballantine. And they didn't know anything about our collection here in Newfoundland, and they're delighted, and they said, yes, we want to record your stained glass. But I think we can do probably more here in Newfoundland to make sure we know what we have. Valuable resources for all our communities. And we have, the cruise ships arrive, and people just pour into these churches. They come in, we want to see the Ballantines. And it's wonderful. And, the last cruise ship that came in, there are a lot of people from Germany and very much interested in Christian heritage. So it's wonderful you've come out tonight. And are there any other questions? And one more question, or is that one more? Yes. Okay.
So for here, the stained glass was installed pretty quickly after the church was constructed because it was reconstructed after the Great Fire. So this church was built in 1896, and the stained glass starts going in 1902. In terms of what was here before, it might have been clear glass. It definitely wasn't stained glass, as you wouldn't be replacing stained glass that quickly. But I can't speak for the other churches. At Gower, it would have been the pattern windows that we looked at in this presentation that would have been installed almost immediately after. And then I guess for the rest, it likely would have been clear windows. So what you see at the Anglican Cathedral in the transept windows, likely something similar to that there until the stained glass programs were complete. And I can't speak for the Basilica Cathedral, but it's likely similar. Yeah.
It took a lot of time from, I can say this. Yeah, the Warrington windows went in very soon after the consecration of the Basilica. And the rest of the windows were left plain, clear glass, until they were filled. And it actually took, for the clear story level, over 50 years for them to be filled. So the last window went in about 1914 on the clear story level. But they were clear glass all that period.
The windows also in the churches in the district reflect that period in our history. These people at the Kirk were Scottish immigrants. They were involved in trade and merchants. Were very wealthy. They only made up 4% of the population, but yet they could bring in, Scotland's finest stained glass maker, and only the rich and famous could afford his glass. And yet this congregation could. The Anglican Cathedral could afford the finest English glass. Many communities in England couldn't afford it. But I think it speaks to our prosperity after the Great Fire. And of course, the deep belief that our ancestors had in their Christian life and wanting the very best here in Newfoundland. In some ways, the Heritage Foundation has said the Kirk is a testament to the success of the Scots in Newfoundland. So, I think we have to be proud that these buildings represent a period in time where they were prepared to spend money to have the very best here in Newfoundland. Will we finish on that? Is there another?
I think Rob had a question.
Rob, okay. Rob? Okay. We can't hear you? Okay. No.
Thank you. As I said, I don't want to stand between the audience and our tea across the way afterwards. But and Megan, thank you very much for the presentation. Fascinating. A question: I wonder if you've found yet in your research much about how decisions were made within the individual churches about the themes and subject matter for the windows that were going to go in. You talked about how they were organized and how the denominational interests influenced the windows. But who decided what would go where? Have you found that yet, or is that still something you're looking at?
It's hard to 100% confirm because there has to be documented sources. Yesterday, you and I discovered at Gower that the individual donors did have some say in how the window was designed, which was very interesting. John Fitzgerald and I have talked about how bishops would sometimes go to Europe and just select what they liked on their trips there for the Catholic Basilica. For the Anglican Cathedral, I have not come across any documents or letters exchanged yet in the archives, but I'm hoping to find some to sort of confirm who was making the decisions. And then Heather and the team at the Kirk, we've discussed how it was likely a committee decision for the windows here, but the subject matter was likely pre-approved based on certain approved subjects for the church.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I think this will conclude questions, and I'm going to call on Dr. Ann Walsh now.
We laugh at the Basilica. There's a legend that Bishop Mullock thought there should be one nice window of St. Patrick, being Irish, but there are three nice windows of St. Patrick. One comes from England, one comes from Ireland, and one comes from France. So he's well represented, and who knows which nation actually owned him. So, Megan, thank you. You've told us not just about our own windows, but you've invited us to consider our identity through the lens, pardon the pun, of those windows. Heather started this evening by saying, you might have a cosh at home, as some people do. But what you've taught us is that we all have a cosh at home, and we all have a Ballantine at home. We all have a Kempe at home, or a Warrington, because these are our windows, and these places are ours. What you've really reinforced for us is the link between art and place and identity. And so thank you. We can all go home, thanks to your talk, knowing that we all own Kempes. We all own Ballantines. We all own Koshes or Warringtons. They really are the heritage and the patrimony of a people, the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. And thank you for helping us to appreciate our identity through the lens of these windows. And now we're going to invite everybody for tea, but first we have a gift for Megan, and thank you. Yeah. And Heather, do you have directions?
Thank you all for coming out, and there's tea and coffee and cookies being served in the hall, which is the building to your left as you go out the door. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I got a little nervous at the end. I could feel myself stumbling through the last bit. Thank you.
You're tired, right?
I do, yeah.
That was fabulous. Yeah. Come on over and have a cup of tea now.
Of course.
Yeah, that was really great. They're going to want to talk to you, so they're heading home.